As we take a look at the proposed budget and you look at the slide before you, you'll see the theme, addressing growth, positioning for the future, and that really does tell the story of this budget and the initiatives that we're going to talk about. Regarding growth, we spent a lot of time during the 5-year financial plan talking about the impact of population and enrollment growth on our financial situation. The impact that we have through those two factors in particular are driving so much of what we're going to talk about today. But also there's some growth and some mandates in this budget which are a major driver in our educational expenses. We'll talk about those as well. Addressing growth is what we feel like we have to do. This budget makes some strides. It doesn't get us all the way there. I think you all are aware of the challenges. But if that's all we ever do, we will simply be reacting to the challenge of growth mandates and remain in a catch-up and a reactive mode, not the great county that we want to be. So beyond growth, this budget proposes strategic investments in a number of areas to improve our business operations and systems, our approach to managing our assets, and our approach to investing in our staff. You'll see all of those things before you. It's the beginning of a more proactive approach we want to lay the groundwork for this year and build on in the years ahead. So beyond reacting to growth, this budget proposes to position us for the future, a future that is more and more impacted by Northern Virginia. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And a future that we have to position ourselves for now because of the growth we're experiencing. So as we look at the future, it's important to take a moment to look at some of the things that we've accomplished in the last year. If you see the items before you on the screen, some of the real celebrations this past year, the Armed Services Memorial in particular, what a great moment in time we had with all the hard work that had been done there, bringing that to fruition. We continue to maintain our AAA bond rating. The Jeff Rouse Swim and Sports Center, an investment that you all made a number of years ago, finally turning a profit, believe it or not. Something that we set up for, we finally, for the first time, are getting some money back on that project. And then a number of improvements that have been underway in this past year that are important to celebrate: our 5-year financial outlook, our joint CIP process with the school board, shared services with the schools, and an important climate survey among some of those items that I think were big improvements in our organization and the things that we're doing as a county. If we look at our profile, again, where we stand today, you see some important figures and facts here. Median income that's very high at over $97,000, just under 145,000 in population. Our student enrollment at 27,850 students, and a median age at 35, one of the youngest in the state. We're going to talk about some of these factors a good bit more as we go forward. So that's where we stand today. And as we consider the year ahead and the next several years, we know that we will continue to be challenged by growth. You all saw this slide during the 5-year financial plan process. What it shows you is a continued steady growth in our population that will remain above 2%. You can see that incline going forward. That's significant at 2% year after year. According to the Weldon Cooper Center, which does all the official population projections for the state of Virginia, in 2017 they had projected that they had stated that we were the 5th fastest growing locality in the state of Virginia, cities and counties, and projected that we would move to number 3 behind Loudoun and Prince William over the next couple decades. If you're not aware of it, the latest news is that Prince William County is now the 2nd largest locality in the state of Virginia. That used to be Virginia Beach. What's happening is the population growth and concentration is moving to Northern Virginia, of which we are certainly a part, and that creates some issues for us as we look to the future. Student enrollment growth, again, you saw this slide before. Projected annual growth continues to remain above 1%. You can see some fluctuations there, and maybe a little bit of a leveling out of a trend of percentage increases from year to year. However, the bar graph shows you that our student enrollment will continue to grow as we look over the next several years. As we compare ourselves across the state, these two bar graphs show you the fastest growing counties in our comparison group and the counties with per capita enrollment, or looking at per capita enrollment, that same groups. What that shows you is those localities with the fastest growth rates, and particularly Loudoun and Prince William, also have the highest tax rates. The point there is simply that growth has impacts and impacts on service demands and so forth. We stand at number 5, as you see there, at 99-cent tax rate this current fiscal year. And in our student enrollment, again, the same group, Prince William, Loudoun, and Stafford, in terms of per capita enrollment. Stafford County is the second highest student population among our comparative localities, and we're the 4th highest number of students per capita across the state of Virginia. All these things are significant. As we look at the county government for a minute, we continue to look for efficiencies and to try to remain conservative in how we run the county government. However, 10 years of steady growth is having an impact on staff and our capacity to deliver quality services. We've talked about a high turnover rate of staff overall, but in some departments in particular, the workload in the Department of Social Services, we spent a lot of time looking at that. 30% turnover in that department, primarily driven by workload, caseload, because of the additional population growth that we're trying to deal with, as well as market salaries, which we'll talk about a bit and how we've tried to address that. We are without question competing in a very difficult market with Northern Virginia for our staff in terms of pay and benefits. We're seeing declining support from our volunteer system, which just means that our career staff are running more calls. Very important things to consider. And one of the things that we have to do in this environment is get more efficient as a county government. That means the systems that we have in place need to keep up with the times. All of those challenges, we're going to talk about how we've addressed them in this budget to try to look to that future that we talked about. So as we look at the effects of growth, we have to do more than simply react. We need to be proactive where the needs are obvious and where basic systems and processes won't serve us as we look to the future. We'll talk about those in just a few minutes. But I did want to, before we get to that, give you some overview of the proposed budget. As you look at this, these two pie charts before you, they tell you about all of our funds total and what our budget is as proposed in 2019. Total expenditures of $572, almost $573 million, and you can see the breakdown in the pie chart. Our schools total expenses in all of our funds total about 60% of the total budget. General government is about 25%, and you can see the other large portion there is utilities. If you look on the revenue side, you'll see that property taxes, local property taxes, make up about 37% of our total resources, and the state revenue at just under 37%. And that is primarily driven by the state revenues that come for the school system as we look at all funds together. If we shift now to where most of the activity occurs in terms of our collection of local tax revenues, they all come into the general fund. If you look to the right-hand side, you see that property taxes make up the lion's share of that. About 70% of our general fund comes from property taxes, primarily our real estate and personal property. Non-local property taxes, the next largest piece of the pie, is really where our consumption taxes, sales, meals tax, and hotel motel taxes are laid out in this pie chart. You can see some of the other sources, including state revenue, as the next largest piece. And in the general fund, we spend over 50% of our dollars on education, and our public safety makes up about 20% of that total pie. General government and our other services that we provide are included there. As you look at non-departmental, that's where we have some debt service expenses and a variety of things that we'll talk a little bit more about, including some capital items, smaller capital items. But that's the picture of the general fund. We want to talk a little bit more about some of those highlights, but our general fund this year is proposed at $301 million, just above that. And some of the highlights, the budget is up 4.6% overall. Our property taxes are increasing about 3.2%, and consumption taxes remain strong at about 4%. We are in this budget proposing the strategic use of one-time monies from our fund balance from last year. Rather than waiting till mid-year making some decisions, we're trying to roll that process into the budget so that we're sure that we're prioritizing those uses for the most important things. These are only going to be used on one-time items, though, not to support ongoing expenses. You see the large budget drivers there. Education funding at $6.36 million. That total takes up approximately 57% of all the new local revenue growth that we're expecting in the coming fiscal year, 57%. Public safety, the next largest, takes up about 33% of that.
Mr.
Yes,
Foley?
ma'am.
Ms. Maurer?
Just a quick question. We're planning for a $6.36 million, your proposed budget has a $6.36 million increase in contribution from us. What was the request?
I think the request was somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million. I don't have the exact figure.
$12 million of an increase from
Right.
the Board of Supervisors.
And this 6.36 is important to point out is education in total. We're going to talk in a few minutes about how that breaks down.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then we do have a work session with the school board on the 20th, and they'll be presenting their budget as well. But certainly it does not fund the request of the school system. It's fairly far short because of some of the other demands in this budget. Again, public safety, staffing in particular, we'll talk about that at just under $2 million. Staff salary increase at about 2%. You see that total. There is a 1% market pay adjustment in here for those most critical positions. And then we talked about the challenge of social services, so there's some staffing in this budget that we'll talk about in greater detail as well. Those first two items are the big drivers. In terms of our tax rate for the coming fiscal year, as a result of a reassessment, which we do every 2 years, the tax rate is proposed to drop from 99 cents per hundred to 96.5 cents per $100 of assessed value. This is a reflection of the difference between the revenue that we have been getting and the revenue that we're expecting to get because of the rising value of properties. You can see residential is up on average over the 2 years at 9% and commercial at 5%. So what we have done is drop the tax rate down to the effective rate to get about the same amount of revenue. It is slightly above that, less than 1%, and that's what generates this new rate that's proposed at 96.5 cents per $100. You can see that it has been
Excuse me, Mr. Foley. Mr. Cavalier?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Foley, what is another penny on the, what's each penny on the tax rate cause us in terms of actual dollars, 1 point?
Yeah, every penny generates about $1.6 million of additional revenue from real estate. Yep. You can see that the trend in Stafford back to 2012 has been to drop the tax rate as the reassessment has gone up. That doesn't mean that the tax bills have dropped like that graph shows, but the tax rate has come down because the values have gone up. So this is every 2 years we go through this process, and this is the rate that we have proposed in balancing this budget for 2019. We'll move now into some of the budget initiatives. They've been broken down into 4 major categories, and we'll talk about what's in this budget based upon these. Supporting community growth needs and strengthening public safety are really issues that are driven by addressing growth. The other 2 items, high performance investments and positioning for the future, are those things that we have put together here to try to do more than just react to growth, and we'll talk about these more specifically. First of all, growth in general has certainly had an impact on services overall. Our growing population and its impact on services can be felt across the board and is reflected in the need for deputies, firefighters, and new facilities such as courts and schools and other service improvements. In addition to the need for staffing to address this demand, the growth in our north has impacted the market for new staff due to the challenge of providing competitive pay and benefits. As we looked at our social services staffing, we knew that some of our folks were as much as $11,000 behind in salary in some of our positions in social services. We are not proposing this budget that we match those localities, but we need to make some progress and lessen that gap. As we go through the presentation, you'll see how we've tried to address both staffing and pay. One of the most significant challenges, however, has been keeping up with education demands due to the growing enrollment, competitive pay, and mandates of the Children's Services Act. As we look at this next chart, you see the major components of that $6.36 million that we talked about, eating up about 57% of the revenue growth. First of all, on the top left, funding for growth. To maintain the current per pupil expenditures that the county contributes with enrollment growing, we've set aside $1.55 million. And then beyond that, more than doubling that growth number, there's money set aside for school board priorities. Compensation is one of their large challenges that they're working on. That's some additional money that would go towards supporting the school's operating needs. And we have seen an increase in our debt service payment, which is also directly attributable to the school's budget. The other two items that you see here are also driving education. Private day school placements in this budget are up 67%, or $2.69 million. There is some support coming from the state for that, but we are expecting about a $1.2 million impact in local dollars to provide the projected new services. In the last few years, you'll see some of the way those expenses have grown. We think this is a good projection based on our experience over these last few years. But in order to keep people out of the highest placements, the highest cost placement for these children that need education services in a private setting, we are also proposing in this budget that we invest $285,000 and put a new classroom in the public schools to keep some of these kids in the schools where they live, not having to go out to the highest placement cost that's out there. So this would bring down cost by making an investment and take care of some of the growth in this area. This is significant. $2.6 million and $1.2 million in particular taken from our local revenues to support this mandated service to educate children in private setting keeps us from being able to do more on the other side of the school budget.
So, Mr. Foley, would this classroom that you have to increase, where is it, in the middle, the $285,000, would that be similar to what we have down at the Heather Enfield facility at Drew Middle School?
It is an expansion of the existing program that we have for public day school.
Okay, and we do not need permission, or the schools would not need permission to build or implement that program from the state. They could do it on their own.
Yeah, public day school.
Because it's public.
Something, and we have it in place now, and we've worked with the school system on this expansion, so we're on the same page to move this forward.
Okay, thank you.
And again, it's just an expansion of the current program.
Ms. Maurer?
Yeah, and just for the public's benefit, you kind of look at $285,000 to serve 6 students. What is the average placement costing us right now? And if you don't know that number, I think it's...
In private?
In private facilities, yes.
Well, if we go to the next slide, I can answer that specifically.
There we are.
Thank you for that setup. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
I just, that $285 for 6 kids, a lot of people are going to key in on that.
You're right. And there are some costs in there that are about starting up this program so we can serve these kids. But the numbers that you see here are the private day costs. And this is the area where we're seeing the largest growth is in the cost per child. And you can see that has grown from 2014 at just under $42,000 per child to $72,000 projected in the future. Even the number of kids in 17, 18, and 19 have not changed much, but the cost per child, that much more reason why trying to do this with our kids in our school system and working together with the schools to serve those children is really critical. So we're taking care of the need that we are mandated to take care of, but we also want to invest in bringing those costs down, and that's what some of those expenses are about. You can see the dramatic increase in both public and private day school together in the graph right next to that. Those are millions of dollars that you're seeing there. In mid-year, we've come to you and asked for $500,000 because of this mandate, and as much as $1 million. So what we've done in this budget is plan for it and not underestimate and have to come back to you. So we've built it into the budget now that we have a trend here that we think is what we're faced with. The other localities in the state of Virginia are struggling with this as well.
Mr. Foley, I just want to circle back. We talk about, and this isn't for your benefit, but it's for the public's benefit. We circle back and we talk every year about going to Richmond and fighting for public day school. And, we're making a little progress, and maybe they'll let us continue our program here in Stafford County, but this is why. Our average per pupil that we're spending is somewhere around $12,000. Is that the number?
Yeah, it's in that neighborhood. I don't have the exact number, but yes.
And so, and the private day school programs really have us between a rock and a hard place, because we have no control over what they charge, and they've got a big lobby in Richmond. And our state legislatures are really putting us in a tough spot. And again, I'm not preaching to you, but it's really important to illustrate this point for the rest of the public here in Stafford County, that the private day school providers that are taking some of our most challenging children, God bless them, but we have no control over how much they charge. And Richmond is forcing us, where we have excellent educators here in Stafford County, and I really want to thank Stafford County Public Schools for having this day school program and trying to A, keep those kids from being on 1-hour bus rides, but B, trying to control those costs. And we're one of the only counties in the state of Virginia that is doing that, and we're fighting the state legislature every year, because $2.69 million would go a long way to teacher raises.
Absolutely, and there's no way around the impact that has on the money we could be providing to our school system. So this board has been very proactive. Donna Kraus has been very proactive. Stafford has been a leader in trying to put this issue on the front burner. Our legislative positions, our delegate Bob Thomas has been aggressive in trying to pursue this. So this is a continued work in progress. Unfortunately, in the meantime, we have to deal with the mandates we have, and we want to invest a little bit to bring some of those costs down. So this budget does propose to do both of those things. So that's a quick look at some of the growth needs. As we talked about at the beginning, there are other things beyond education services that are being impacted by growth, and particularly in this next area, the next category of our expenditure, strengthening our public safety. We did include in this budget 5 sheriff's deputies to assist with moving towards our community policing goals. There is a new fire engine crew, which contains 12 people to run 3 shifts, to put another engine out in the field to address some of our challenges with response times. We are working towards that diligently. I will say on this one, in the year ahead, some of the requirements that we're under a grant right now will go away in December, and will allow us to drop our minimum staffing on an engine to 3 people per shift rather than 4, which is pretty standard in localities like Chesterfield County, Albemarle County, and a number of others. Once we get to that place, I think what we're going to end up with is really 2 for 1. If we're able to fund this one engine, I think by mid-year we're going to be in a position to then shift some staffing and get another engine out. Those things are going to make a huge difference with some of the challenges that we've been faced with in terms of responding to calls because of the decline in volunteer support and just the increase in calls. So that's a really important proposal in this budget. Our hazardous duty public safety folks are the only in the region and beyond our region that are not receiving a retirement multiplier in their benefits when they retire. that's at the highest rate it could be. So we are really just moving to the market on this third item that I've identified here to put our public safety folks in the market for their retirement benefits. And finally, to help invest in volunteer support for our fire rescue system, we are proposing to add a volunteer services coordinator to work with recruitment and retention of volunteers to work in our fire rescue system. And we'll talk a good bit more about fire and rescue when we get to the work sessions. I want to say that in addition to the items you see here, we have proactively set aside some of the growth in our revenues to pay for some of our future obligations. The grant that I mentioned, the SAFER grant for fire rescue, expires this year, so we have set aside $366,000 to help overcome that, because we're going to need to keep those staff on board when that grant runs out. And we're also setting aside from current revenues $350,000 towards the ultimate debt service payments on a new court system, which is under review right now. One way or the other, there will be an expense to that, so we're planning for that ahead in this area of public safety. As I've mentioned earlier, 33% of our new revenues are eaten up by these increases in public safety. I did want to say that there is a market study underway for our 911 dispatchers, and we've put the first priority after social service workers on getting their pay to the market. That's also something that's in this budget going forward. And just one final note, a new funding formula has been developed and is currently under additional review regarding how we fund our volunteer fire system. We used to be on a performance-based system that does not work given the current conditions that we have in the county, and we're moving to more of a zero-based budget approach, which will also set aside some one-time monies for needs that come up from time to time, and will move us towards bulk purchasing and shared expenses across our departments that we think are going to be much more efficient in terms of the use of these dollars. We're going to talk about that in more detail. It is a work in progress. I don't think that any of the numbers in this budget are going to need to go up to implement it. It's possible that they could come down slightly. I will say that this volunteer services coordinator is funded about 80% from savings we expect to realize from moving to a more effective system. The important part of that is that what we're going to do is make sure our volunteer system stations have what they need to operate on a day-to-day basis, their basic needs. So this change won't take anything away from achieving that goal. So we move now from the first two categories, primarily addressing the impact of growth and our reaction to it, to positioning ourselves for the future. On this next slide, you'll see a number of things that are important. The social service workers in there are 4 of them that are certainly about the growth that we've expected, but they are really an investment in quality services, which have suffered due to the heavy workload and being significantly behind the market for social services. The remainder of the positions, though, are to support investments in our systems, economic development, and continuing to support quality financial review and analysis to address future funding challenges. We have to build some capacity in our financial planning staff, budget staff, so there's a position proposed in here to help do that because of the much more higher level of scrutiny and financial planning that we need to do for this future. Finally, regarding staffing, this budget proactively plans for the potential of Medicaid expansion and its impact on an already strained department by including a contingency for 2 additional positions paid for 85% by the federal government. If Medicaid expansion does not move forward, then the extra 15% in local dollars for those 2 positions could be reallocated to other priorities. We think it was very prudent to put that in here and proactive. Obviously, we don't know where that's going to go, but I do know if that mandate comes down on a department that's already stressed like they are, we're going to have a really difficult time, and our turnover rate will remain at 30%. So that's an item that you may have some ability to make some adjustments to. The other Department of Social Service positions are supported in part by state and federal dollars as well. The remainder of the investments that you see here, we've talked a bit about before, but are about retaining quality staff. who even with the modest increases proposed in this budget are still in an overall, at the overall level of where we were 10 years ago in terms of staffing per capita. So our staff has been doing a lot for a number of years, and while our public safety staffing has grown to deal with the challenges, the rest of the staff have had to do continued work with a growing population. These positions are targeted in areas we believe will make the most difference for the future. A final word in this area, the budget proposes a new approach to addressing our market challenges regarding pay. It proposes a continued commitment to targeted market-based pay increases and an ongoing process for checking our pay against the market on a regular basis through a classification and compensation study that will provide us with an in-house tool to check the market on an annual basis to assure that market pay is going to the most critical positions in the county. Our turnover level is something we need to do more study of, but when we're dramatically out of the market, we know that there's a need to make some progress there. So this budget takes a systematic approach. This is in contrast to every 5 or 10 years doing a really major study and coming up with a huge number because we've fallen so far behind. This is going to systematically every year check the market, do some in-house work, and then as we come to you to how to distribute that 1% market pay beyond the COLA, it'll help us to have the guidance and the data that we need to make some good decisions. So that's significant. You'll see some one-time expense for the comp study and an ongoing expense for this market that we'll look at every year. So that's a good investment in some of this high performance that we're talking about. A few other initiatives in this budget that aren't big cost items. In fact, there's some of the strategic use of one-time monies. We are proposing to set up an innovation fund to try to charge up our employees to come up with great ideas to save us money and to improve services. So we've set aside $100,000 in startup money, if you will, for new ideas that come forward that are proven to save us money in the long run. We've got some extra money in here for skill-based training programs and money in here for a talent management system to leverage our talent within the organization. This system will provide performance management, succession planning, and learning opportunities that we're not able to provide now. Again, some of the other investments we're making in our staff. And our final area is positioning for the future. Some of the strategic investments that we are proposing to make. We've talked already about the proactive funding strategy for setting money aside for the courts and the SAFER grant. We've talked a little bit about system improvements with our talent management system, but these are some other areas that we have proposed in the budget, primarily using some of our one-time money to do some things that we think are going to make a difference for the future. Given where we are and the changes that we're experiencing and the challenges, if we don't invest in systems to better manage the work that we're doing, I think we fall further behind. The on-base program that you see there, that's a document management system, by the way. We have that partially implemented. This budget proposes, along with those other two items, to expand that system moving forward. A couple other items in this area about the future. I've mentioned several times about the capital program and the use of one-time monies. We have some initiatives even in changing policy around the CIP, strengthen the CIP reserve process to identify and allocate year-end and one-time funds. We're going to recommend adding an additional CIP report by policy that will tell you at the end of each year what is the status of the projects, how much money is sitting out there that's not yet been spent, so that you're better informed and the public's better informed. And one of the things that we have done is we had our capital money in both our general fund and in our capital fund. And that led to some confusion about how much we were spending on capital. So what we have done is we have proposed keeping only items that are under $100,000 in our general fund for capital outlay, and everything above that will move into our capital fund so that there's better transparency and visibility of those things. Most importantly, the changes that we're proposing to make We'll prioritize items within the context of the budget process, providing more critical review of projects. So both our capital projects and some of the other one-time use are proposed to change in this budget in terms of a mid-year review where you have kind of a wish list in front of you. What we're suggesting is that unless it's critical because of timing, that we move it into the budget process. In this budget, a few things that we're doing to make use of one-time money in a more strategic way. There is a vehicle replacement program proposed in this budget. In the past, we have put not as much money to replacing vehicles as we need to, and we've gotten way behind. So this proposes a new program that will use some of the one-time monies to catch up and then keep up on our fleet. One of the other results of this is that I think we will certainly be able to reduce our fleet by better managing the vehicles that we have under our care. The Innovation Fund, I mentioned, is one-time monies. Funding for one-time needs in our volunteer stations, talked about that. We have set up a larger reserve for this Children's Services Act. Because of the changes we've had each year, we need to set more money aside in reserve, so it's used some money for that. The compensation study, the ERP study, the talent management system, and enhancing our jail reserve are some other uses of the one-time money that we think are critical priorities that we'll talk to you some more about. One thing I will say, in the coming year as well, we anticipate having criteria to utilize in making these decisions as we continue revisions to the joint CIP process. We have criteria now for bond-funded projects. In the year ahead, we're going to set up criteria for all of our major repair, replacement, and renovation projects. So that will measure nicely with the changes that we are proposing here, and I think put us in a better position as we look to the future. Also, as a part of these improvements, in the future we'll provide an annual report I mentioned earlier to account for the status of all projects, something that I don't think that you all have had a good opportunity to look at in the past. Because there are some exceptions, staff anticipates that there may be a few items that will come to you at that mid-year review because we'll have to make a decision before the budget process. So you'll still see a few of those. A couple of those came forward to you this year. Really, the timing was the important thing. We believe that these changes support the board's desire for greater transparency, scrutiny of our spending, and fiscal responsibility. So again, positioning ourselves for the future with better use of the one-time dollars that we have. And finally, a continued commitment to positioning for the future through economic development. You're going to see a lot of activity in the year ahead, and we've continued to set money aside for creating downtown Stafford in our targeted growth area. There are transportation improvement projects that will have an economic development impact underway. As we look to the future, it's not so bright in terms of funding for transportation, but some critical projects underway now. Sports tourism, as we talked about earlier, has begun paying off for us, and we're continuing to keep a commitment to that. And we are proposing in this budget that we convert 2 contract positions to full-time to support our economic development operations. There's about a $30,000 cost for that, and we expect in the next couple months to announce to you a new economic development director, which we hope will finally get that office in a place where we can be more aggressive on economic development and move us forward. The Stafford Economic Opportunity Fund continues to be funded in this budget as well to support economic development. So we think that we are achieving those goals that we've set out, the theme that we've talked about, addressing growth and positioning ourselves for the future. Those priorities that we talked about are also aligned with the board's priorities, as you see here. All the items we talked about fitting right in to the goals and priorities that you have set for this county as we look to the future. There are a few other services that we provide, obviously, and I'm going to take just a very few brief minutes to talk about those. Our capital program, you can see to the right-hand side, actually schools and county government, most of the expenditures right now are focused on repair and replacement, major fire apparatus, and some other repair to buildings and facilities. Those things are outlined there. It's a $7.6 million capital program overall, and you can see some of the items that we have funded. Again, mostly replacement and repair. On the left-hand side, the schools, we do have some of the money in that CIP for the same kinds of repair and replacement of facilities. We also have some decisions that have yet to be made about what other things will be funded, particularly as it relates to a new elementary school. We are in the process of working with school staff and preparing to come to the two boards with some data and analysis that has been underway for a number of weeks since the boards got together through the joint CIP process. The particular issues there are around what we need to address elementary school capacity as we look to the future. So there is a placeholder in the CIP for that decision to be made, and you will see just kind of a wedge in the CIP until that decision is made. Again, something that's going to transpire over the next few weeks, I think, as you engage with the school board. Our utilities budget, we talked a good bit about this during the 5-year financial plan, total of $67 million. Over the past 5 years, we have put 100 miles of new pipe in place in our utility system, and we were understaffed even before that. So this budget, through some revenue neutral positions, basically saving money and generating revenue, is adding some staff to try to keep up with the heavy load that we have. You look at the two pictures that I think you all will recall from our discussion during the 5-year plan. Flushing our systems is a maintenance item that takes a lot of staff time and heavy work, and we need to catch up on those things, and this staff are critical for that. And that really disgusting picture that you see on the lower right-hand side, which we talked about, grease in one of our sewer pipes because we don't have pre-treatment going on with some of the businesses in the community. They're creating some heavy-duty breakdowns and challenges for our staff. So all of the items that you see here with revenue neutral positions and some of these new positions in utilities are really about a big push to be sure that we can maintain this growing system, particularly as we look to the future. Transportation, the items in the tan-colored box are the items that are underway in 2018 and 19. The real story here is that the revenues are not keeping up by any means with the challenges that we face in the future. So we are basically beyond the projects that you see here with a combination of federal, state, and local dollars challenged to do any new projects as we look to the future. This is, of course, a strategic issue, and of course, Supervisor Dudenheffer is providing some leadership on trying to update the list of those priority needs so that the board can take a look at it and set some real priorities for the future. But the revenues are declining, so there's a real challenge here in terms of moving forward with some of the projects, the critical projects, as we look to the future. We just wanted to mention, because we're going to have some hearings on tax rates, but these are tax rates in service districts that are initiated by our citizens because of major dam repairs that are needed. These are the proposed rates that we will have separate hearings on to help fund the dam replacement and repair that's needed there to protect the property values of those citizens. Just wanted to mention that as well to you as something that's going on. Those hearings on those tax rates will have to happen at a different time than our regular public hearings. So again, I think you all are very familiar with this. So to sum up our budget proposal, we believe it does make strides in addressing growth while also positioning for us for the future. It supports community growth needs by addressing significant education needs and mandates. It strengthens public safety through increased deputies and new fire and rescue crew that will evolve into 2 crews as the year goes on, addressing some of our growth pressures. It invests in high performance with important investments in market-based pay and professional development. And finally, it positions us for the future, a future that is even more challenging with the impact of Northern Virginia on us, by investing in systems and process improvements and a continued focus on business and economic development. The final slide is our budget process. Our first work session is next Tuesday, beginning at 2 o'clock from 2 to 4. You can see on the 20th, we're going to provide some overview of financial policies and have a joint meeting with the school board, and you can see the rest of the process ahead with us. We will have a detailed agenda broken down for you in advance of next Tuesday. We're going to focus on the general fund as we start. We'll take by functional areas, look at public safety and the issues there, answer questions that you might have, and then move on to the other functional areas, such as community economic development as an example. That should get you well versed in what's in this budget and any changes that you feel are necessary as we go forward. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be glad to answer any questions. That's our proposal for 2019. We look forward to jumping into the process and getting some direction from you all.
Thank you very much, Mr.